It was a quiet afternoon in the kitchen, the sunlight filtering through the window and casting a warm glow over the old wooden table. Maria stood beside her grandmother, watching her move with the ease that only years of experience could bring. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the air, but there was something more to the moment, a sense of anticipation. "Grandma," Maria said, her voice filled with curiosity, "what is that paper you're holding? It looks old." Her grandmother smiled, her wrinkled hands gently unfolding the yellowed paper. "This, my dear, is a family secret. This recipe has been passed down for generations," she explained, her voice soft but filled with pride. Maria leaned in, intrigued. "A family secret? What's so special about it?" Her grandmother chuckled, her eyes twinkling. "It's not just the recipe. It's the way we make it. The way we say it. It's a tradition, and part of that tradition is teaching you, just like my grandmother taught me." Maria's eyes widened. "But how am I supposed to understand this? Some of the words here are strange. What do they mean?" Her grandmother patted her hand gently. "That's why I'm here. We'll learn together. And you'll also learn a little bit of English along the way." Maria looked at her grandmother, amazed. "English? In a recipe?" "Yes," her grandmother nodded. "English is the language of food all around the world. You'll see." Maria was excited, but also a little nervous. "All right, let's do it." Maria watched as her grandmother placed the paper on the table and pointed to the first line of the recipe. "Let's start with the basics," her grandmother said, her finger tracing the words. "First, we need flour." "Flour?" Maria repeated, trying to remember the English word. "What else do we need?" Her grandmother smiled and continued. "We need sugar, butter, and eggs." Maria nodded, trying to keep up. The list seemed simple, but the words felt foreign. "Okay, so flour, sugar, butter, eggs. I think I got it." "Good," her grandmother said, handing her a bowl. "Now, let's get started. First, pour the flour into the bowl." Maria picked up the flour and, following her grandmother's instructions, poured it into the bowl. "Flour," she said, repeating the word aloud. "It's so easy when I say it." "Yes," her grandmother agreed. "It gets easier with practice. Now, the sugar." Maria grabbed the sugar jar, carefully pouring it into the bowl. "Sugar," she repeated. "That sounds like, 'Do you want some sugar in a coffee shop?'" Her grandmother chuckled. "Exactly. The more you hear these words, the easier it will be to remember them." Next came the butter. "Butter," Maria said, as she placed it in the bowl. "What's next, Grandma?" "Now, the eggs," her grandmother replied. "Crack them one by one and add them to the bowl." Maria cracked the eggs, carefully adding them to the mixture. "Eggs," she repeated, feeling a little more confident with each step. "This is kind of fun. It's the beginning of something special," her grandmother said. "Now, mix everything together." Maria took the spoon and began mixing the ingredients in the bowl. "Mix everything together," she repeated, as she stirred. "Now I'm getting the hang of it." Her grandmother smiled. "See? You're learning English and cooking at the same time." Maria couldn't believe how much fun she was having. It felt good to be learning something new, both in the kitchen and in a new language. She was beginning to understand that English wasn't just a subject in school. It was a part of everyday life, even in something as simple as making a cake. As Maria stirred the ingredients together, she couldn't help but feel proud of what they had accomplished so far. The mixture was coming together nicely, and the kitchen was filled with the comforting sounds of her grandmother's voice guiding her every step of the way. "Now," her grandmother said, "it's time to add the special touch. You see, every great recipe has its unique step, its own magic. For this one, we need to add a secret ingredient." Maria raised an eyebrow. Secret ingredient? What is it, Grandma? Her grandmother smiled mysteriously. Ah, that's for you to learn. First, let's make sure we have everything mixed properly. We need a smooth batter before we add anything else. Maria focused on the task at hand, mixing the batter more carefully now, following the rhythm of her grandmother's instructions. Mix everything together, she said quietly, as the spoon moved through the bowl, making sure everything blended well. Perfect, her grandmother said. Now, pour the batter into the baking tin. Maria carefully poured the mixture into the tin. Pour the batter, she repeated, focusing on the English phrases she was learning. Her grandmother glanced at her. How are you feeling, Maria? Is the English making sense to you? Maria smiled. Yes. It's a little tricky, but I think I'm starting to understand more. Like, pour the batter. That makes sense because I'm pouring the liquid into the tin. And mix everything together is just like stirring. Her grandmother nodded. Exactly. It's all about understanding the context. English is everywhere, in everything we do. The more you practice, the easier it gets. Maria looked down at the bowl. What's next, Grandma? Now we add the secret ingredient, her grandmother said with a wink. But first, let's pause and think about how we can describe it in English. We need the right words to explain it. Maria looked closely at the small bottle her grandmother had placed on the counter. It was dark and mysterious. Is this it? She asked. Yes, her grandmother nodded. It's vanilla extract. A tiny bit of it makes the whole recipe come alive. But the magic is in how we use it. Maria thought for a moment. Vanilla extract, she repeated. That sounds fancy. Her grandmother laughed. It's simple but important. A little goes a long way in flavor and in life. Okay, so we add just a little bit, right? Exactly, just a few drops. And when you add something special like this, you're making the recipe your own. Maria carefully added the vanilla extract to the batter. Vanilla extract, she said, repeating it to remember. I think I'm starting to feel like a chef. Her grandmother laughed again. You're well on your way. Now let's move on to the next step. The vanilla extract added, and the batter now ready. Maria looked at her grandmother, who was preparing the oven. So, what's next? Maria asked, curious and excited to see how this cake would turn out. Her grandmother looked at the recipe once more, and then glanced at Maria. Now, we wait for the cake to bake, she said. But there's one last step that's a secret. It's a special technique we use to make this cake truly unique. Maria's eyes widened. A secret technique? What's that? Her grandmother's face lit up with a warm smile. It's called the final touch, and it's the key to making this cake something unforgettable. But it's not just about what you do in the kitchen. It's also about how you say it in English. Maria raised an eyebrow. How do I say a secret technique in English? Her grandmother gently placed the baking tin in the oven. The technique is simple. You have to know how to say, set the timer and wait patiently. Set the timer, Maria repeated, nodding. I know what that means, like when you cook something for a specific time. Exactly, her grandmother said, pleased. And wait patiently means to be calm and not rush things. Baking takes time and you have to trust the process. Maria took a deep breath. So, I need to wait patiently for the cake to bake. That's right, her grandmother said. Sometimes, waiting is the hardest part. But just remember, good things come to those who wait. Maria smiled and stood next to her grandmother, watching the oven carefully. It's like waiting for something special to happen, she said, feeling a sense of calm. Exactly, her grandmother said, her voice warm. In English, when you're learning something new, you have to practice and wait for the results. And just like baking, learning a language takes time, patience, and the right ingredients. Maria nodded. So, The secret technique is not just about the cake. It's about the process of learning too. Yes, my dear, her grandmother said, smiling. And now, we wait patiently for our creation to come to life. As the minutes passed, Maria could feel the excitement building up. The kitchen smelled wonderful, and the oven timer was finally beeping, signaling that the cake was ready. Her grandmother carefully opened the oven door and pulled out the tin, revealing a perfectly golden brown cake. The warm, sweet aroma filled the room. Maria took a deep breath. It smells amazing. It looks perfect. Her grandmother smiled. That's the magic of patience. Now let's give it a taste. Maria eagerly cut a small piece of the cake and took a bite. Her eyes widened in surprise. Wow, this is the best cake I've ever had. What's the secret? Her grandmother chuckled softly. It's the love we put into it and the words we used along the way. Maria thought about it for a moment. The words? Like set the timer and wait patiently. Exactly, her grandmother said. You learned to follow the recipe in English, and that's what made this cake special. English isn't just for the classroom. It's everywhere in the kitchen, in conversations, and even in moments like this. Maria smiled, feeling proud of herself. I'm really starting to understand how English works in real life. Good, her grandmother said, her voice full of warmth. Now, I want you to try saying this in English. This cake tastes great. Maria grinned and repeated the phrase. This cake tastes great. Perfect, her grandmother exclaimed. See how easy it is when you practice. English is like this cake, it gets better the more you work on it. Maria felt confident now. I love it. I think I could say that about a lot of things now, like this recipe, and even learning English. Her grandmother smiled, proud of her progress. Exactly, Maria. You're on your way to mastering both the recipe and the language. Maria and her grandmother sat down at the kitchen table, enjoying slices of the cake they had just made. The sun was setting, casting a soft glow across the room. There was a sense of contentment in the air, not just from the delicious cake, but from the shared experience. Maria looked at her grandmother with a thoughtful expression. You know, Grandma, this whole recipe feels like more than just making a cake. It's about sharing something with people, right? Her grandmother nodded, taking a sip of her tea. Exactly. A recipe isn't just for yourself. It's meant to be shared, just like language. When you share a recipe, you share a part of yourself. And when you share English, you open doors to the world. Maria thought about this for a moment. So, it's not just about knowing the words. It's about connecting with others. Exactly, her grandmother said with a smile. When you speak English, you can connect with people from different countries, different cultures. You can share your experiences, your ideas, and even your favorite recipes. Maria smiled, feeling a warm sense of connection. I think I understand now. It's about the people, not just the language or the food. Her grandmother placed her hand on Maria's. That's right. It's the connection that matters. Just like with this cake, when you share it with someone, it becomes more special. When you speak English with others, you're sharing something that brings you closer to them. Maria felt a new sense of purpose. I want to share this cake with my friends. I want to tell them how I made it in English and how much fun it was learning the words. That's the spirit, her grandmother said, her eyes shining with pride. And you'll see how much more meaningful it is when you can explain it in English. Maria took another bite of the cake, savoring the sweetness. I think I'll invite my friends over to try it. We can even talk in English while we eat. Her grandmother laughed gently. That's a wonderful idea. And the best part is, you'll be practicing English without even thinking about it. As Maria finished her slice, she felt a sense of accomplishment. The cake wasn't just delicious, it was a symbol of her progress. A simple recipe had become a bridge between learning a new language and understanding the importance of connection. A few days later, Maria stood in front of her friends at school, holding a plate of the cake she had made with her grandmother. She had been practicing the English words for the recipe, and couldn't wait to share what she had learned. "Hi, everyone." Maria greeted them with a smile. "I made this cake with my grandmother, and I want to tell you how I did it in English." Her friends gathered around, curious. "How did you make it?" one of them asked. Maria took a deep breath and began. "First, I added flour, sugar, butter, and eggs," she said, holding up her hands as if demonstrating the steps. "Then, I mixed everything together. The secret ingredient was vanilla extract. After that, we set the timer and waited patiently for the cake to bake." Her friends listened intently, impressed by how confident Maria sounded. "That sounds so good," another friend said. "But what's vanilla extract?" Maria smiled, ready for this moment. "Vanilla extract is a special ingredient that makes the cake taste better. It's like magic." Her friends laughed. "Magic, that's awesome." Maria continued, feeling more and more confident. "After the cake baked, we enjoyed it. And when you share something like this with others, it's even better. Like learning English, it's more fun when you share it with people." Her friends clapped and congratulated her. "Wow, Maria. You're speaking English so well now. You made it sound easy." Maria beamed. "It feels easy when you practice every day. Just like with the recipe, if you don't practice, the cake won't come out right. Same with English." Her friend Sophia nodded. "I think I should try learning English like that. I'll practice with you." Maria smiled, feeling proud. We can help each other. It's all about practice. As Maria looked at her friends, she realized how much progress she had made. Not only had she learned new words, but she had also shared something meaningful with others. It wasn't just about knowing how to make a cake or speak English, it was about building connections, one word at a time. A week later, Maria's grandmother invited her to a small family gathering at their house. It was a special celebration, and Maria was excited to share her success with the people she loved. She had invited a few of her friends to come, and they were all eager to try the cake that Maria had made and hear the story of how she learned the recipe in English. As the guests arrived, Maria greeted them with a big smile. "Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy you could join us today." Her grandmother greeted everyone warmly as well, welcoming them into the house with a wide smile. "It's a special day for us all. We're celebrating not just family, but also learning and sharing together." Maria felt a rush of excitement as she took her friends to the kitchen, where the cake was ready to be served. "This cake is something I made with my grandmother, and I want to tell you how I did it step by step in English," she said, her voice full of energy. Her friends gathered around, listening intently as Maria went over the recipe in English once again. "First, we added flour, sugar, butter, and eggs," she said, confidently sharing the steps. "Then we mixed everything together, and the secret ingredient was vanilla extract. After that, we set the timer, waited patiently, and enjoyed the final product." Maria's grandmother beamed with pride. "Look at how well she speaks English now. It's not just about memorizing words. It's about using them in real life, with people you care about." One of Maria's friends, Sophia, raised her hand excitedly. "Maria, you should teach us how to make this cake in English too. I want to practice speaking like you." Maria smiled. "Of course. We can practice together." As the group enjoyed the cake and chatted, Maria felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The cake was delicious, but the real sweetness came from the connections she had built through learning, practicing, and sharing in English. She realized that language was not just about vocabulary. It was about the people you met and the experiences you shared. Her grandmother placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've learned more than just English, Maria. You've learned how to share, how to connect, and how to make every moment special. Maria looked around at her friends and family, smiling. And that's the best part.